Welcome, everyone. We're so grateful for your presence, for you coming on to sign on to this beautiful offering. I invite you to take a moment and just really ground in the body and really touch into this land of where you're located in this moment. And take a moment, if you can, just to sense into this collective community that has come together in this such a crucial, important time that we are all facing in this world, especially in Gaza and Palestine. And if you'd like, scroll a moment, just look into all the faces. We're now, I think, over 218 people. We have over 600 people who've signed on to this beautiful offering. So I invite you to really sense into this beloved community that we're co-creating together. So my name is Michele Ku. I use the pronouns she and hers, and I live on the unceded lands of the Ohlone people in Northern California. I'm also a member of Sacred Justice Coalition. So the Sacred Justice Coalition arose as a response to the mounting crimes of genocide, apartheid, and occupation in Palestine. We are disturbed by the silence or claims to neutrality from some Dharma institutions in the face of this violence. We come together from diverse Buddhist traditions and from Palestine, South Africa, the UK, and the US. We root in deep love and contemplative practice and devotion to the Dharma as we commit to sacred response and right action. We see no separation between spiritual liberation and political liberation, between practice in the temple and protest in the streets. Today, we invite you to listen deeply to these speakers that the powerful have attempted to silence. They will share their lived experience as activists, solidly rooted in humanity and deep spirituality. We are grateful for your presence. I'd like to have Emiko please introduce yourself and share. She is one of our very skilled Zoom hosts who will support this meeting.
Thank you so much, Michele, and just hello and welcome to you all. My name is Emiko, as Michele said. My pronouns are she, they, he, kin. I'm held and supported on Ohlone land, and I am so deeply honored to help support this program, this event as your Zoom host. So please direct chat me if you need anything, if you have tech issues, access desires, or other needs. We also ask that you please do not chat anyone else. We will not be holding a Q&A today, but we do want to hear from you. So if you have questions or ideas you would like to share with the speakers or with Sacred Mountain Sangha or Sacred Justice Coalition, we invite you to do so via the Q&A feature, which you will find on the Zoom toolbar. And we also have closed captioning, which you can find along that same toolbar. Now, we will be collecting your questions and comments, and we'll share them with the speakers after the event. We will also not be taking any official breaks, so we invite you to take care of yourself as needed. Thank you all so very much for your presence.
I would like to introduce Maia Maria, who is a healer and storyteller and lives at Dharmagiri Sacred Mountain Retreat in South Africa and is a part of Sacred Justice Coalition. She is going to invoke all protectors and spirits of the land to open this gathering. Thank you, Maia.
Thank you, Michele. Greetings, everyone. So taking a moment just to acknowledge all we walk with, all the spirits, guides, and ancestors that are already here. I greet the spirits of this land, the spirits of all the lands we are on. I greet the spirits of the lands of Palestine. And I greet all the ancestors that have gathered, our grandmothers and grandfathers, all our ancestors through the lineages. I greet all the spirits of the waters, the spirits of the mountains, the spirits of the wild. I greet the earth spirits. I greet all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, the storytellers, the teachers, the freedom fighters. I call in all who are close to our hearts, all who walk in the lineages of truth, of freedom, of justice and liberation. Dear ones, thank you for this gathering. Thank you for bringing us together, for bringing us to this moment. Help us to stay grounded, to stay present, to hear what we need to hear, to say what we need to say, to feel what we need to feel. Help us to turn towards this moment of genocide, this moment of unraveling, and help us to stay clear in our hearts so we can hear and see and feel the truths that we are here to see and feel, so we can find our way in this time, so we can find the offering that is ours, the actions that are ours. Dear ones, you have brought us here. You know the reasons we're here. You know the reasons we need to see and feel whatever it is that we need to. So guide us. We're so deeply grateful for bringing us together. Ashe.
Thank you, dear Maia, for that beautiful invocation. Allow these words to land, these images to come through the heart for all of us. Right now, I'm going to introduce Thanissara, who is going to introduce Ilan Pape, our first speaker. So I'm just going to introduce Thanissara. Many of you know her. She is an Anglo-Irish Dharma teacher who's trained as a monastic in the Thai forest tradition for 12 years. Originally from London, she co-founded Dharmagiri Sacred Mountain Retreat in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and Sacred Mountain Sangha in California. A spiritual guide, author, poet, and dedicated social justice and climate activist. Thanissara's work is grounded in the intersection of contemplative practice and systematic change. She believes we can reclaim a humane and ethical world by cultivating an interwoven web of communities, listening beyond our silos while connecting around shared values. Welcome, Thanissara.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Maia. Thank you, Emiko. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'd also like to warmly welcome you on behalf of all of our team and Sacred Mountain Sangha, who have been working in coalition with Sacred Justice Coalition for this last year to host events and publications in response to all that was unleashed on October the 7th. Firstly, I also want to thank you from all of our hearts to our very special guests for being with us and sharing your experiences and perspective. It's a real privilege, actually, to have you with us and for us to have the chance to listen to you as our speakers, as you also help us grapple with this horrific situation of extreme violence, such profound loss and uncertainty. We're particularly aware that Maia, who we'll be listening to shortly as a journalist in Gaza, faces the possibility of violent death every day. Already nearly 200 journalists in Gaza have been killed, and yet, as you will see, Maia's courage and steadfastness is invincible. So let's make sure that we can listen carefully to Maha, as she pays such a heavy price for doing the work she's doing. Jamal, who will be one of our guests, also faces horrific violence and uncertainty every day in the West Bank, while all the time he continually helps people, receiving guests and negotiating between the little that is possible and the enormity of what is denied, not just over the last year, but for decades. Lubna, who will be welcoming, is a journalist in Jerusalem, gets up each morning and faces the truly impossible, checking into families, friends, and associates in Gaza, offering emotional, spiritual, and humane support as a friend and ally, while also tracking a litany of atrocities she powerfully writes about with daily heartbreak, while managing a team of journalists both in Jerusalem and London. Ilan has shown enormous courage, going against the grain as a Jewish Israeli scholar who for years has spoken out against Zionism, has advocated for Palestinian freedom, and critiqued the apartheid regime in Israel. This can't be easy, especially when so many academics now standing up for humane values over this last year have been cancelled and vilified. Nikki, too, from Jewish Voices of Peace, has also been deeply impacted this last year. They left their university in Florida when they refused to concede to the university's demand to endorse Zionism, and also left due to the state's fascistic legislative attacks impacting her department, which is focused on gender equity and LGBT plus rights. Nikki, like many Jews in the US and globally, have been navigating the heartache of threading out from learned familial identities between Zionist Israel and Judaism, which is an enormous journey to undertake. All of our speakers show immense courage in service of an inner compassionate ethic, which I invite us to consider emulating in our lives, when now we all need to speak out and stand up for humane values that are fast eroding. Bringing this event together has been a complex process, as we've been navigating 7 time zones and working with a truly dedicated group of people some of who have for decades been living under extreme stress. Given all that's unfolded over these last 14 months, there's a lot of exhaustion, overwhelm, grief, anger, and so many emotions all happening at once for all engaged and tracking the horrors unleashed by Israel's government on Gaza, the West Bank, and far beyond. So I'd just like to really acknowledge this for everyone that is feeling this. So can we just take a breath and a pause for a moment, and in particular from our heart offer a prayer for all impacted and devastated by this immense suffering. And while we're doing that, just holding together this circle of kindness and inner reflection and outer sharing. So we can just keep that in our hearts and mind as we go through the event. So we'd like to welcome this as a welcoming space for everyone. It's not about really performing, but here to listen with our hearts and speak from our hearts, particularly these days as we need to find each other as humans, as really feeling beings, moving beyond our personas, and to speak more and more truly. Why? Because increasingly, and particularly over this last year, brutality has been enabled, promoted, and normalized by powerful governments and many in mainstream media. We've already become almost immune to violence, and our movies and stories are littered with it. And here in the US, we've endured decades of mass shootings. It seems we've also become immune to witnessing children in Gaza suffering amputations without anesthetic, seeing children's heads and limbs blown off, people crushed and lost under the rubble, prisoners being tortured in the extreme concentration camps, tanks being driven over numerous bodies. The litany of atrocities is so immense. I just read words of a vegan IDF veteran who stopped driving over bodies because he was fed up, as in his own words, scraping off the flesh and blood from tires. So, perhaps we don't really want to hear this. We're so sensitive sometimes, but why should we be sheltered when thousands of children and families face this brutality day by day? Hundreds of thousands of children have to face this every day in Gaza. The Guardian just reported in a new study that children living through the war have found that 96% of them feel that their death is imminent, and almost half of them want to die as a result of the trauma they have been through. This is why we must speak with heart and be true, be real, be loving in spite of it all, because something demonic is taking over humanity. The monstrosity of this brutality, this sadism and cruelty and mercilessness has become normalized. Again, we just saw this in the halls of power here in the US, where senators and representatives hosting one of Israel's war criminals stood up and clapped and cheered for genocide. And at the same time, humane values like kindness, compassion, care, ethical restraint, the repeated call for accountability, red lines that should never be passed, numerous speeches voicing moral outrage at such desecration and destruction, oceans of grief at the inane loss of it all, millions of citizens protesting worldwide. All of these guardians of the world and of our psyches are fast becoming ridiculed, dismissed, laughed at, and increasingly becoming arrested and imprisoned. Gaza has ripped away the veil, exposing the depth of brutality of the US empire. It's one of the very profound things that's happened this year. This genocide is also America's and the UK's, and all who are sending these monstrous weapons to sustain it. Gaza exposed Israel's brutal apartheid system for the world and the long injustice delivered upon the Palestinian people that they have long endured. It also unveiled the myths of Zionist Israel, which in the eyes of the majority of global citizens has been uncovered. So Gaza has made clear that this merciless imperialistic machinery that perpetuating violence, dispossession, ecological collapse is prepared to brutally suppress citizens around the world, taking away freedom of speech while weaponizing the charge of anti-Semitism against those who are Jewish also, and those who care deeply for the safety of the Jewish community around the world. Gaza has made clear that very few of us now live in democracies. Instead, we have been abandoned to fascistic oligarchies in this fight for the last resources of the planet. But Gaza has also inspired a revolutionary spirit, tying our own liberation to the long anti-colonial struggle, which now calls us all to engage with, to break free from this spell that keeps us in a state of complicity. The events of this last year have undeniably helped us understand the interconnectedness of all and to know ever more deeply, as Mr. Mandela said, our liberation is tied up with the liberation of Palestine. In fact, our liberation is bound to the liberation of all. This path of revolutionary spirituality focused on uplifting ethical and humane values is not just about overthrowing political power, but transforming consciousness. For many of you here, you're Dharma practitioners, and for all of us, it calls us to ground our actions within the intersection of inner contemplation and contemplative sacred practices with systemic change. We have much work ahead as we radically realign our priorities. So regards this event, there will be, I think, a link of the focal point questions that we've been pondering to prepare for this event in the chat. We're not going to be able to provide all answers. Instead, at this time, we just like to hold this space as an opening into this conversation as we meet the global realities of this time of genocide, ecocide, and extinction, all of which call us to enter a different curriculum, to speak out, to stand up, to act together. So we have some chance of co-emerging the kind of world we want our children to inherit. So thank you so much for bearing with me, as I just want to lay out a few brushstrokes of the territories that I see that we're in. And I'm very, I think on all of us, we're so honored to listen now into our fellow dear friends, fellow activists and allies, Dharma practitioners, so we can listen more deeply into your words, into your reflections. So I'd like to introduce Lubna to join me, who will also introduce Ilan, who's coming to speak. Lubna is a Palestinian journalist, meditation teacher, and spiritual activist based in Jerusalem. She's been involved in actions for breaking the siege in Gaza for over a decade. Lubna has managed big teams of journalists in Gaza and the West Bank for the last 10 years. She's inspired to co-create a revolutionary Dharma for this historic time for people living through war and genocide. Lubna, we are so heartened by your presence with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Thanissara, and thank you, Ilan. We are all here from different time zones, the Palestine, the UK, the US, Ilan in Cyprus, in Europe, and we got a bit confused with time. So I would love to give the platform to our friend and beloved activist Ilan Pape, to come in and to speak, to give us some of the input of this year and what he would like to share with us
Okay. Now
Even there's
I'm
so
good.
many questions we can ask you actually, and I sent you if you like
You
there's
send
a
me, yes,
long
I'll
list.
try to focus. I'll
But
try and
I
focus on
want
the.
you to trust what is urging now from you and what is that you want to share. And really thank you. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for the friendship. Thank you for the courage.
Thank you.
And for standing up in this very hard time in Palestine. So the platform for you.
Thank you so much, Lubna. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. I hope this rather unstable link will work. I moved from my computer to my phone. For some reason, the phone is more reliable, I see. So I think it will be okay. So thank you again for inviting me. Yes, Lubna sent me a few questions. I think I can at least address some of them in a more comprehensive way. I'm afraid to say that if someone would ask me about the last year and a half, if I was surprised by, first of all, the ferocity of the Hamas attack on the 7th of October, I would have said no. I saw it coming. Anyone who was there on the ground, anyone who analyzed, lived through, or was engaged with what the Palestinians were experiencing for 76 years, for 57 years, and particularly the people of Gaza for more than 17 years, was not surprised that the Palestinians did not give up and will not give up any attempt that they can master to try and break out of the prison that became Gaza, the ghetto that became Gaza, and as they do everywhere else in Palestine, struggling against ethnic cleansing, oppression, discrimination, apartheid, and the refugees struggling for their basic human rights of returning to their homeland. So the Palestinian struggle continues and will continue. So I wasn't surprised by another phase. I was also, unfortunately, not surprised by the cruelness and ruthlessness and callousness of the Israeli reaction. I already warned against it in 1999. It was very clear for anyone who examined the Israeli educational system that the graduates of that system, those who just began the school system in Israel in 99 or 2000 into the 21st century, would be heartless, ruthless, racist soldiers when faced with Palestinian civilians wherever they are. So I was not surprised, unfortunately, by the genocide. I already called the Israeli policy in 2010 incremental genocide. This is also something that I share with many scholars who analyze Zionism as a settler colonial movement and Israel as a settler colonial state. And without complicating this input, I think particularly people who live in the United States, in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand understand perfectly well what is the main motivation for any project that is a settler colonial project. And that motivation is the elimination of the native. Elimination can take the form of genocide, as it did in North America and in parts of Australia and New Zealand. It can take the form of ethnic cleansing, as happened in other settler colonial situations in the world, or through apartheid system, as happened to the settler colonial paradigm or regime in South Africa. So again, as terrible as it sounds, neither the resistance nor the Israeli reaction to it, at least from my perspective, and I think from the perspective of quite a few people who are involved in this issue, either as people who live there, or activists or scholars, this did not come as a big surprise. What really surprised us, which really took us by surprise, is the incomprehensible reaction of the West, particularly Europe. Unfortunately, many of us have very little expectation from the Americans. But we did have some apparently unsubstantiated anticipation from Europe, especially from Western Europe. The fact that a genocide that is daily broadcast on our screens, that is daily reported, that is exposed in its full cruelty for anyone who is watching news, reading them, consuming them, the fact that such a genocide, such a crime against humanity, has not stirred the European parliaments, the European governments, the European academic institutions, the European main media, that it didn't steer these institutions, political, cultural, economic, towards any kind of an action to stop the most televised genocide in human history, is really beyond comprehension. It doesn't mean that we cannot explain it, but still, it is beyond comprehension that it still continues a year and a half after this genocide began. And I think it's very important to try and begin to understand, what does this indifference, what does this disregard mean, not only for Gaza, not only for the Palestinians, but for the world at large. And in order to begin to understand it, we need an historical context. And as you probably know, for those of you who follow the events closely, one of the main demands of Israel and its allies from anyone reporting, covering, analyzing, engaging with the situation in Israel and Palestine, whether as a politician, an academic, a pundit, or a journalist, the main Israeli demand is not to contextualize the Hamas attack on Israel on the 7th of October in any historical way. In fact, there are academic institutions in Germany that forbid their faculties to use the word context when referring to the events in Gaza. But without the context, we don't begin to understand, as I say, the European immoral, unacceptable position that continues to this very day. And for that, we have to go back in history to understand why it's happening, and maybe by understanding why it's happening, maybe find ways of dealing with it. And this would be true not just in Europe, because I know many of you do not live in Europe. Wherever you are, whether it is in the global south or in the global north, most of the governments, and there are exceptions, but most of the governments and most of the academic institutions are as indifferent as the Europeans towards the genocide, in the sense that there's so much they can do, and they don't, in order to stop the genocide. So that historical context begins with the fact that Zionism was a European solution for a European problem. And that's very important to remember. Europe had a serious problem, a huge problem of anti-Semitism. It failed to integrate, to accept, and respect its Jewish communities. I'm generalizing here, but of course, I'm talking about the rule and not the exceptions. It failed so dismally to deal with that particular racism towards the Jews, both from a religious and nationalist perspective that the inevitable outcome came in 1939 with the beginning of the genocide of the Jews that continued until 1945. And that genocide was possible not only because of Nazi ideology or because of Hitler's vision. The Germans had allies everywhere, from the Netherlands up to the Ukraine. And Europe did not deal properly with that dark moment in its history. And a very diverse group, I can call it an alliance, a very diverse alliance of people that included evangelical Christians, European imperialists, American capitalists, and Jewish ideologues. This weird alliance offered Europe a way of not dealing with its own racism and neglect that is reflected today in the continued racism in Europe towards other groups, and suggested that the best way to solve the problem of the Jews in Europe is to take them out of Europe and to build a European Jewish state at the heart of the Arab world, at the heart of the Muslim world, against the will of the indigenous people of Palestine. And it was clear from the very beginning that if you want that solution to work, you will need to use force, because it was a project of displacement and replacement. You need to use force, and when force would not be enough, you will need to use more force. And we're still there. We're still there, more or less 120 years when this particular solution was conceived. And Europe not dealing with it then showed that it didn't treat the Palestinians as human beings. It dehumanized the Palestinians. They were invisible, and they still are invisible today, to too many Europeans who have the power to change things. So I think it's important, very, very important, to understand that this historical context explains, of course, doesn't justify, but explain an indifference that is not only morally outrageous, but is one of the main problem or the main hurdle that prevents the international community from ending the genocide. Because as already has been mentioned, and it's important to mention it, because sometimes you have a feeling that people think that the worst is behind us. Today was another day of genocide, and the genocide continues. And with all the incredible solidarity movement shown by so many people, it doesn't have the impact that is needed to stop the genocide. And for that, we need to find a way of getting to the corridors of power, not for building a new Palestine, not for decolonizing Palestine in the future. This is the assignment of the Palestinian Liberation Movement, and hopefully one way it would decolonize Palestine, liberate it, and created a free Palestine. But right now, we need an alliance which is much more pragmatic than moral, that for whatever reasons, we would hope that people with modicum of decency would understand that they now are needed in order to stop this genocide, because it continues. And not only does it continue in Gaza, it will move to the West Bank. And Israel would probably Judaize parts of Syria now and parts of south of Lebanon. The current Israeli government is motivated by a vision that one can call messianic and neo-Zionist, of resurrecting the biblical state that they think the Old Testament was telling them about. And they think that they are winning because the Assad regime fell, and they think that they have defeated Hezbollah in Lebanon. They feel that the window of opportunity is opened, both to expunge the Palestinians from history, not only as a people, but also as an idea, and to turn Israel to the most respected or feared regional power.
Ilan, thank you so much for your notes. I want to use the time and then to ask you one last question. In 2007, you left Israel and the university, and you were attacked by, I remember even all of your friends and colleagues in the university. And we are in times where clarity and action is so much needed, and we face so many especially in the academics that like not taking action. And we want to hear from you what gives you all these years courage to speak up, and what do you have to say for others who are listening to you at the moment?
Yeah, I think that because this is the way I analyze the situation, I know that it's not legitimate, it's immoral, and it's not going to be there forever. And that gives me a lot of hope. But I also understand that you cannot be an onlooker and wait for something which is wrong to just dismantle by itself. You need to be part of the process that makes a rogue regime disappear and replaced by something better. And because I'm a historian, I know that these processes take time. And I know that solidarity and goodwill of people accumulates. And it's sometimes very difficult to see your own impact as part of a solidarity movement because it takes time to unfold as a transformative power. So I think that once you realize what you are facing and what is your moral stance against it, I don't think it's very difficult to continue the work, whatever the price is. And what gives me hope, but also hope that is fused with a lot of apprehension, is that I, as an analyst, as an historian, not as a wishful thinking and not as an activist, really as someone who's analyzing the Israeli society for more than 50 years, I can see it's beginning to disintegrate. And I'm not surprised. Israel was created as part of a political system that was built after the First World War by Britain and France. And not only Israel is disintegrating, all the nation states that were created after the First World War were political structure that did not fit the reality on the ground. And that reality on the ground now comes back to bite these political structures that don't work. And one of these political structures is a Jewish state at the heart of the Arab world and the Muslim world. So I can see a future for the Palestinians being liberated from a Zionist state. What I'm worried about, of course, is that it's a long process. I'm an historian. I know these processes take time. And I also know that the structures or regimes, and we saw it in South Africa, exactly because they find it difficult to sustain their legitimacy, their credibility, are becoming even more ruthless than they were before.
Thank you, Ilan. Thank you so much. We would listen to you forever. Thank you for time, and I hope to see you soon in Palestine. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Well, it could be a bit stressful to hold an event and to speak in public, but I really feel that we are all together, all of you, all the friends who are attending and listening are holding this with me as one family, one body. And it's not easy to have this combination of spirituality and politics, but this is time where we all have to integrate to bring all of ourselves together. Before I introduce Maha, and I just want to say a few things I wrote here for 1 minute. I want to thank you all, of course, for attending in this critical time where humanity is going through such a heavy crisis in morality and normalizing ethnic cleansing, genocide, and starvation. We are here together with Secret Justice Coalition, Palestinians from Gaza, Jerusalem, the West Bank, and also those of us who remain refugees in different parts of the world, We are here to share with you our pain, our experiences, daily life, and resistance and resilience. 14 months passed since this war began and decades of ethnic cleansing and occupation. The situation put many of us in junction regarding of our rules and our clarity and where we are standing and the action we are taking or not taking. Unfortunately, many spiritual teachers and Buddhist teachers remained silent. They refused to release any statements or any call to end the war, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocide. Some of them even put Buddhism in service of war crimes, while some teachers offered to use techniques of mindfulness in times of shooting. We watched this in Iraq and we watched this in this current war against the Palestinian people. They betrayed the Dharma, the foundation of Buddhism, which is based on ethics of sila, of right action and right speech, and most of all, the commitment to end the suffering for all beings. This event is about knowing. I believe that knowing is power, and learning, and what is happening. It's about courage. What is that needed from ourselves? How much we can give up of our privileges to stand with justice and liberation. And it's about action. And really thank you for attending and for being patient and for helping us holding this space in this time. I want to introduce Maha Husseni, a wonderful Palestinian journalist, originally an activist, a human rights activist, also working in Euromed for a long time, documenting the violations of human rights of the siege in Gaza before the 7th of October. Maha originally from the north of Gaza, and she's displaced since a year with her cat. I don't remember how many places she had moving to. Now she's in Deir al-Balah. She couldn't attend because of the services and the internet and the situation. And she sent this video. We all tried to convince Maha to leave Gaza when Rafah was opened and she refused. And there's so much to learn from her and I'm sending her my love. Today, there was an attack in Deir al-Balah. 10 people were killed, including the mayor of Deir al-Balah. I wrote to Maha to check on her. I didn't hear from her until now. I wish and hope she will be safe. And please, Miko, you can put the video.
Hello from Deir al-Balah in the central Gaza Strip. This is actually not where I used to live before October 2023, but I was forcibly expelled from my home on the 13th of October in Gaza City. And since then, I've taken refuge in 3 shelters across the Gaza Strip, including Zawaida in the central Gaza Strip, Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, and then finally here in Deir al-Balah. I hope this would be my last shelter before I'm able to return to my home in Gaza City. But even if this did not happen, even if I was forced to move to a 4th and a 5th shelter, I'd still refuse to leave the Gaza Strip and seek refuge elsewhere outside of Palestine in general. It's not just me, by the way. It's hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza who still refuse to leave Gaza despite this genocide being waged against them. Yes, there are thousands of Palestinians, hundreds of thousands even, who have fled the Gaza Strip since the beginning of this genocide, fearing for their lives or to protect their children. But the majority here still refuses to leave Gaza because mainly we are aware that living under occupation means to resist its constant attempts to empty your land of its indigenous population. Yes, it's exhausting to live your entire life trying to resist a relentless force, trying to render you powerless and voiceless in the face of its oppression. But at the end, it's our decision and our choice to not to give up in the face of this oppression, in the face of this longest occupation in history, and not to surrender under all these attempts to force us out of our country. Another reason is that I'm, by the way, not originally from Gaza City. I'm originally from Jerusalem. My grandparents and my father were born in Jerusalem, and they lived in Jerusalem actually until 1948, upon the creation of the State of Israel. Back then they were forcibly expelled from Jerusalem and they came to Gaza. And the reason behind our resistance to this, to these attempts to force us out of Gaza, is that we do not want to repeat history. We do not want to repeat what happened to our grandparents and our parents, and to be once again forcibly expelled after over 70 years of occupation and of injustice. Actually, I think that people here who live in Gaza prefer to die here than to be expelled again and to repeat the history of their grandparents and be forcibly expelled elsewhere. Choosing to be a journalist in a place where one can become a main target for being the voice that echoes the victims, or the pen that writes their stories or documents the violations perpetrated against them, is like walking into your own death. But after all, it wasn't a choice. I did not actually have the luxury to choose my own profession. I became a journalist after witnessing all of these injustices and being aware that the Western media was turning a blind eye to the Palestinian suffering and even favored the occupation's narrative. I'm aware of the risks that accompany my job, and I'm aware that I might be killed at any given moment because of my job, because of my voice, because of my pen. Especially after around 190 Palestinian journalists have been killed, most of them directly killed while doing their profession, while doing their job, documenting the genocide in Gaza. But after all, our responsibility as Palestinian journalists becomes even greater given the fact that Israel has been preventing any international journalists from entering the Gaza Strip to document the stories on the ground, to document the atrocities and the human rights violations objectively on the ground. We're aware that if we do not cover this story, no one will cover it. If we do not speak for the victims, no one will. And those hundreds of thousands of victims will remain voiceless forever, and these atrocities will go unnoticed and unheard by the international community and the world in general. So I think it's now no longer a profession for us as Palestinian journalists. It's a duty to continue working despite all of these risks and despite our awareness that we might get killed at any moment, and despite all these threats and intimidations by the Israeli occupation to silence us. It's a human duty now more than ever. For over 14 months now, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip have been living in inhumane conditions created and engineered by the Israeli occupation, specifically to destroy them as part of the genocide. Since day one of the genocide, the Israeli occupation was clear about creating these conditions by cutting off electricity, water, fuel, food, and even international aid and medicine. For 14 months, we have only been moving from one dangerous place to what we think a less dangerous place, but we all know that no place is safe in Gaza. Every place can be targeted. Everyone can be targeted at any given moment and without any justification. For 14 months, we have only been thinking every day how to secure our daily meal, how to secure clean water. We have only been thinking how to stay connected to the internet. There is no electricity in Gaza for over a year now, and we have been mainly relying on solar panels that can barely recharge our devices so that we can stay connected to the outside world and to keep working. As journalists, there have been times when we had to use a pen and paper to write our reports and then send them via text messages to challenge the blackout imposed by Israel, and that has persisted for months. But I think that what's more dangerous than all of this is that these conditions are not only engineered and created to destroy the Palestinians during genocide, but they are created to leave a long impact even after this genocide comes to an end. Today, Israel attempts to only turn Palestinians from people who call for their freedom from the occupation to residents and displaced people and refugees who can only think, or who only have the time to think of how to secure their daily meal, so that they cannot have the time to think of resisting the occupation. And this is why we call on the international community and on activists worldwide to keep speaking up for the victims here in Gaza, especially during blackouts, and not just speak, but also take tangible steps by speaking to your governments to pressure Israel to stop the genocide and to hold its violations on the Palestinians, those very violations that have been endured by Palestinians for over 75 years now.
Yeah, I suggest to take a breath, to breathe, to be present, and to send our prayers, our goodwill to Gaza and to everyone in Palestine, in Syria, and Lebanon, and Sudan. Maha in particular always inspired me of waking up every day, being displaced somewhere in Deir al-Balah and doing her job and her work and keep writing and sharing her voice with the world. So much resilience and so much faith and power that we all can learn from her. We would like to invite our next speaker. We had been preparing with Jamal for 3 weeks for this event, and I have to say that Jamal today forgot that he should speak.
In fact, I was outside.
During the event, I have to call Jamal and to find him somewhere in the West Bank and to tell him, Jamal, come now. So it's good to have you, Jamal Juma. He is the coordinator of the Palestinian grassroots anti-apartheid wall campaign, Stop the Wall campaign, and he is a secretary member of the BDS movement. Jamal is very known for decades working with Palestinians in the ground, with farmers, basically supporting them, defending their lands and homes from settlers. Worked with Bedouins in the Jordan Valley who actually was under the threat of a transfer, and also South Hebron, where a lot of villages transfers happen. The situation in the West Bank have been always horrible and hard, and now since the 7th of October, it's became almost impossible. It took me and Jamal one day 5 hours to reach from one town to another town, just because everything is closed, the way that usually would take from you 1 hour. So Jamal, we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. We give you like 15 minutes. I will stop you in the middle, ask questions, and so expect me interfering in your talk. It would be good if you give us some idea of what's happening now in the West Bank. You can, all the settler violence and the confiscating of the land, annexation, that Smotrich is speaking a lot about it. And I also want to speak with you about taking action and spirituality. So leave time for me to ask you more questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Lubna. Thank you very much. And thanks for all who's attending this evening. In fact, to talk about what's going in the West Bank is just like making for me, it's difficult, in fact. Maybe Ilan was summarizing it in a one or two sentences. It is a settler colonial state. And what's happening in the West Bank is the settler colonialism. Since I will start with 67, they start from the second day of the war. They start building colonies in Jerusalem and Jordan Valley. They continue building settlements. Settlements is about now over 220 settlements all over Jerusalem and the West Bank in general, distributed all over in the Palestinian areas, between the Palestinian communities, set up in the very strategic places that's controlling the water, controlling the agriculture, our agriculture, controlling the strategic places, connection to the Palestinian cities and villages. And this has been developed by time. Building the wall in 2002 was also a junction in the settler colonial project, where they start framing, in a way, this colonial apartheid system that we saw it today, to block the Palestinians into ghettos and separations in the West Bank, separating them from each other. So now you have like a wall of 800 kilometers long, 9 meters high, with all these devices and surveillance and guardings, and that separates the Palestinians from each other, from north, middle, south, separates the villages from the cities. We create like a kind of a limbos, or isolations around also the Palestinian main cities, and block the Palestinians from their main resources. 62% of the Palestinian land became isolated from them. And that was subjected for the expansion of the settlements, the colonies. And let's say in 2017 was also another junction when Trump came to the power, and he started in a way just like jumping over the international law, dismantling the international law, and recognized Jerusalem as a capital for Israel, recognized the sovereignty of Israel over Golan Heights, and also the colonies. And they targeted the United Nations, the UNRWA and the United Nations, as it's representing the Palestinian refugees. In 2020, they launched what they called annexation map to annex the Palestinian areas. And this is a map of the Israeli-American joint map that wanted to annex like more than 33% of the Palestinian areas to Israel totally. Israel started immediately at that time demolishing Palestinian communities in Area C, in Jordan Valley. The biggest community that has been destroyed and displaced is called Homsa in the north of the Jordan Valley. Then they start partially destroying the other communities. When the war on Gaza, the genocidal war in Gaza started in 2000, last year, in 2023, October, they start immediately, they seize the West Bank. They close all what's so-called Area C, declare it as a military zone. No Palestinian villages, cities, people from the cities can go easily from city to another. And they start massively, ethnic cleansing of the Bedouin communities. Who's doing the ethnic cleansing, in fact? It's joint operation between the paramilitary, which is this fascist terrorist settlers in the West Bank, that they are living in the settlements next to the Palestinian communities. And by the way, this started also almost 8 years ago, after 2017, where they start what they called it like pastoral settlements. Pastoral settlements are just a few settlers, young settlers, all of them, very fanatic, criminals, that they set them up next to the Palestinian Bedouin community, giving them, of course, they have armed, guarded by the military 24 hours. They start like attacking the Palestinian villages, Palestinian communities, trying to, they block also their areas, grazing areas where they take their animals, and they start attack their houses, their shelters, their tents, aiming to push them out. Like, you know, the people will leave, they will afraid and leave. Before, like, most of the people didn't leave in spite of all this oppression, all of this like fear situation that they put them in. But after 7th of October, they started like any by guns, they come with the military and they push the people out from there, exactly like what they were doing in 1948 to the Palestinians at that time, where they just like kick them out from their villages and destroy their villages. The same happened. 30 communities, and we released just like in a report about this expulsion that's happening. It's really horrible. Like when you see the amount of land that they control and they confiscate now, just by expelling these 30 communities is exactly as Gaza Strip. 240 square kilometers that has been totally taken over by the Israeli settlers, and now they are building outposts and settlements in it. And they are continuing. There's more than 69 communities now. These are under daily attack, aiming at pushing them out. So there is massive ethnic cleansing that's going on there. You are talking about like attacking the people at night, attacking women particularly, because they know how this is sensitive issues. They just like want to scare the people. That's a copy also from 48. They kill the animals. And they beat the people, beat the kids in front of their parents, beat the parents in front of their kids as well. And this is done by the soldiers or the settlers, and the soldiers just guarding them, like supporting them if there's any action from the Palestinians. More than that, and even worse than that, when the settlers came to the Bedouin communities and they called the police, the Israeli police, and told them, we found our cattle that has been stolen, it's here. So the police came with trucks and take the Palestinian cattle. They take it from in front of their eyes. It's stealing that has been done by the government, by the police, by the army itself, while the people is looking. So this is the level of the humiliation that they are going. This is one side, the Bedouin communities. The other side is like the villages, like in the mountainous areas around Ramallah, Nablus, and Hebron, elsewhere, like as well. Where for the second year, for example, they were not able to go to pick their olives, this is one of the main economic season that the people is depending on their life. And that's mean beyond the economy issue is like that's all this land, the Palestinians not anymore able to go there. What they are doing is cementing, in fact, this apartheid system that I'm talking about. You don't have any access to Area C. This is like your land, this is your trees, but you don't have any access to it. It's confiscated, it's taken, it's stolen. It's became developed also when Donald Trump won the election. Immediately after he won the election, Smotrich, the Minister of the Economy, has been announced or has been telling what's so-called civil administration and settlements administration in his ministry to start preparing all the things needed for annexing the West Bank. Also, the Minister of Economy was saying, like, they declare that they are going to build the biggest ever in Israel, the solar energy in the Jordan Valley. And he declared that West Bank is going to be the main hub for energy and industry for Israel. Netanyahu also, he had been put the annexation of the West Bank on the government discussions, and also to move it later to the Knesset. So they are preparing themselves now with when Trump start his period next month. they will start immediately with the process of annexation of the West Bank. This means lots of expulsion that will go. You know, the number of the Palestinians that has been killed in this year and the end of last year is more than also 800 people that already killed. Systematic attacks on the refugee camps that's happening, and the destruction of the infrastructure there in Jenin and Tul Karim, in Al Far'a, in Nablus as well. The prisons, like what happening in the Israeli prisons, like since 7th of October, didn't happen in any way like in Guantanamo or Abu Ghraib or in any other places. How they are treating the level of torture that the prisoners have is unbelievable. We talk about like over now 11,000 Palestinians that has been arrested in this year and the end of from the end of last year, also from the beginning of 7th October. And this continue. And as also Ilan said, the next step after that, when we talk about the annexation of the West Bank, that means the ethnic cleansing. So Israel is coming with ethnic cleansing that could be also coming with another genocide in the West Bank. Why Israel won't do that while they have the support, unconditional support from the United Nations, unconditional support from Europe, the silence, it's like that's shocking us as a Palestinians, like it shocked the whole world. How comes that they see this televised people is slaughtered like in hundreds every day, and they are just like, so it's okay for them to give Israel more weapons, to give them more like destructive weapons that never been tested, never been even used, just in Gaza and later on Lebanon.
Jamal, you know, we as a Palestinians, we feel like more exposed than ever for the violence of the settlers, for the army, and we like don't have any protection with what's so-called the Palestinian Authority and etc. I want you to speak a little bit. First of all, I want to say that the concept of the words revolutionary Dharma, revolutionary spirituality came from Jamal when we had these meetings. Can you reflect on that, what that means for you? And in the same breath, if you can speak up about what actions people can take in this condition of our reality at this time.
Yeah, I will start from your second part question, Lubna, which is what we can do. Palestinian civil society since 2005 were calling the international community widely to boycott Israel, to do the BDS, boycott, disinvestment and sanction on Israel, until it's comply with the international law. This is the path and the way that the Palestinian civil society that choose like to end the oppression, end the colonization, end the occupation. And we think that as it worked in South Africa, it should work with Palestine. Like it's without the standing of the world with South Africa in their struggle against the apartheid system, it won't, maybe they would be until now still they are under this apartheid system. But as it is at works like with South Africa, it should work with Palestine. Because we are calling first, we are calling for the people. We are calling the people of conscience, free people around the world. We are calling and talking to our hearts and the people's hearts. We are people of same blood, same flesh, feelings, and rights. Every one of us has the right to live. Every one of us has the right to live in dignity and freedom. And that's what we are seeking as a Palestinians. And that's what we are calling for. In order to do that, like Israel shouldn't continue to be immune. And the one who can strip this immunity is the people themselves. What was happening during the genocide in the first months of this genocide was very, very important, where people going in the streets in masses, millions were in the streets. For the first time, we saw the United States in the people there is like in hundreds of thousands of people in several states, and there. That's very important. That shows that there is awakeness, that people started to understand, that people is not accepting what their state is doing and what Israel is doing, and that's they don't accept also to see the people slaughtered this way, and they are not in any way back the genocide. So this message that they have been sent to the world is very important, that they are not backing their country, their state with what they are doing in supporting the genocide that they are doing. And here, from here we go to the first part of the question, which is when we are talking about our spirit as a people, our spirit should first, like any, refuse the killing of the people. It's about morals, it's about ethics. And the ethics and morals is to stand up with each other as a people. Any winning that we have as a people is a winning for all of us, for our spirit, for our future. So that's why I think, like any, you have to be, and has to be a revolutionary from this point of view, because of our ethics, because we refuse to see what's happening to the other people. That's our message. That's all prophets that come to this world. That's all philosophers that coming, and we are now, we know about, and we are following their steps. It's about our humanity. So it's our duty as a responsibility as a people to stand up with each other to end this oppression and atrocities that we are going as human beings.
Thank you so much, Jamal, for your words, for your spirit, for being calm always, despite all the miserable daily life we have and facing. There's 2 million Palestinians living in the West Bank, and there is over 2 million in Gaza, 300,000 in Jerusalem, over 2 million inside Israel. I'm just saying that because we didn't mention it, but we're living in the same place, but we are divided. We're holding different papers, different IDs. Someone from the West Bank can't marry someone from Jerusalem unless he gives up on his residency. I'm a native Palestinian from 48. We are the generation who remained in their lands after the Nakba. So it's like we can't really collaborate and meet and move. It's closed. We live under walls and sieges and checkpoints. For those of you who haven't been in Palestine, it's very close, very far. Jamal could be 20 minutes drive from my house, but it would take me 3 hours to reach him because I have to get to pass a checkpoint. 2 million Palestinians in the West Bank, many of them never seen the beach or the sea because they are not allowed to come what's so-called inside Israel or 48 or to Jerusalem. This is for your knowledge. Shukran, Jamal, ala al-musharaka.
Shukran, Lubna, shukran ilkum. Thank you very much.
And for your spirit and for being here and for sharing all what you share. I don't take it for granted that Palestinians are still talking, still sharing, and having this energy to bring their pain and experience and politics, and still have faith that we can make a difference. Thanissara, I will pass it for you to hold us, ground us, love us, hold us. All what is work for you, and thank you all for being patient. I feel your energy. I feel really at home with you. Thank you.
Love you so much, Lubna, as we all do, and thank you. Lubna is Dharma practitioner, teacher, guide for so many. Holds an unbelievable amount every day, meeting this circumstance that would crush the best of us, and still keeps going, which feels very close to the spirit of Samud that I've been learning about, the spirit of steadfastness, this incredible power, the power of resistance, that has been expressed through everyone we've heard, something very invincible in the spirit of the Palestinian people, really bearing so closely to the land, to the ancient trees, the olive trees, to the ancestors, to a deep remembrance that goes back into the mists of time. So our hearts break with you all, and break also for the peoples within Israel who have been caught up, many caught up in this spell of extreme violence coming from trauma, fear, all sorts of like a spell. It's like a spell. So thank you all for all everyone is doing to break this spell. The spell that we all get caught in, fear and hatred. And as the Buddha said, you can trace it all back to the fires of the mind, greed, hatred, and delusion. So here, let's just take a pause for a few moments. Here we're breaking that inner, undoing that inner engine of samsara, of these forces that drive humans into these rounds of suffering and violence, forcing and creating these dynamics of oppression, which we all want to break free of now, this time in our planetary journey. So let's just hold that prayer. Let's just take a few moments to pause and feel this great earth beneath us, this ancient being, the ancient one. Whatever we call this land, whatever we claim we have, actually, we must remember it all belongs to her. It all belongs to this spirit, this grandmother, earth, this great being, this sacred web of life, of nature, of which we are a part. So to call forward compassion for it all, to call forth the protective forces to break the spells of these illusions and delusions and arrogance and this fire of violence, this grasping of greed. We must resist and do all we can to stop this momentum, to stand by those most vulnerable. This is one of the great fearlessnesses that we can bring forth, courage. So all of these qualities of courage and fearlessness and strength and steadfastness that we've been hearing about through the spirit, let's just breathe that through our own bones into the earth, into our allyship with all beings at this time. Feeling our feet, our butt on our cushion, on our seat, or touching the earth, feeling our breath, taking 2 or 3 deep breaths. As we hold this light of Dharma, this spirit of collective liberation for all. And calling on all those ancestors, all of the protectors, all of the ancient ones. The angelic realms, subtle realms, to be present, to protect, to illuminate, to heal, to transform, to liberate. This great essence, this great mystery we're all part of at this time in this world. Thank you so much, everyone. So it's my really great pleasure to invite Nikki to join us. Nikki, thank you so much. And we're so grateful for your presence here. So I'd just like to introduce you more fully to Nikki. Nikki Morse has been involved with Jewish Voices for Peace for a decade and served as part of the core organizing team for the South Florida chapter for several years as a faculty member at Florida Atlantic University and director of Center for Women, Gender and Sexuality Studies. Nikki worked closely with educators and the labor movement to fight back against legislative attacks on education under Governor DeSantis. In 2023, Nikki's activism for ceasefire landed them on a turning point, on Turning Point USA's Professors Watch List, oh my goodness, and compelled them to relocate from Florida to Maryland, where they are now a member of the Coordination Committee for JVP Baltimore. In addition to working with JVP, Nikki is an organizer with the International Solidarity Movement and Community Hotline for Incarcerated People. Amazing work, Nikki. Thank you so much. They are active into synagogues committed to Palestinian liberation, as Zedek, Chicago, and Hainanu in Baltimore. Welcome. Welcome, Nikki. So I just wanted to start you with a focal point to help you into the conversation. We've heard a lot that's been shared in a lot of our conversations leading up to this conversation together. So given all that you've heard and all that you're with and what's been sparked within you, is there anything that you would like to elaborate on or respond to further before we
Thank you so
more
much.
into your journey?
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to my comrade and friend from South Florida JVP, Ken Barnes, who connected me to this incredible community. I think the main thing that is coming to my mind listening to these incredible speakers who I'm so honored to share space with is that everyone spoke of duty and responsibility in each person's account of why they do the work they do. And of course, everyone is making these choices from very different positions. Everyone spoke of the fact that it is what we must do to act, to fight for justice, to be part of what makes the change that we know is necessary. And I think that is an incredibly powerful place to begin from, to ask ourselves, where we feel we have the option to choose and where we see the inevitability of taking revolutionary spiritual action rather than choosing to opt out. And so I'm incredibly honored to be part of a community like this community that is saying no to the false choice, I would say, to opt out. The idea that in the Buddhist community, people have been choosing to say that this is an outside issue, that the genocide is something that will not be addressed. I would argue, that that's a false choice, and that when we reach these moments where it seems that we have the option to opt out, or even if we think about Maha and her incredible courage to stay when she had it seemed the option to leave, she says no, that this was her duty, her responsibility, her commitment. And so I think those moments, those choice points are not always a place or need to be thought of not as a place of two equal options, but really of those moments where we choose to go with the path that is our duty, our responsibility, that is our commitment to the rest of the world, to bettering the world. So that's my initial response to what everyone has shared. I was incredibly grounded and inspired by that idea of commitment, duty, and responsibility.
Yeah, no, that's thank you for that. I think that's those are very universal principles, very ancient ones, and very needed now that we can all relate to. So yeah, I think this is one I'm really also interested in so deeply, Nikki, as an anti-Zionist. I'm just reading it as it's here, but as an anti-Zionist Jew, an organizing member of Jewish Voice for Peace, Jewish Voice for Peace, and the calls to action that you are engaged with. And part of that is really also a very profound journey of unlinking Jewish identity or going beyond Zionism, and what could or what does that look like for you, and anything else you would like to say about that, because that feels like a particularly core point of unlinking that is important for this whole collective liberation process.
Thank you. As Ilan Pape discussed, none of this started October 7th, and certainly it didn't start October 7th for me, because, as he pointed out, I'm like so many people on this call from a culture that itself is a model for Israel's settler colonialism. Growing up, I didn't learn an accurate history of the indigenous people who had been ethnically cleansed from the land where I grew up in the United States. And that is exactly the model that Israel's education system is now following in trying to erase the history of Palestinians. So that idea that this is something that has long roots is something that I think I keep coming back to. I'll tell a little story about how I grew up as a child. My mother, who is my Jewish parent, was never very interested in Israel. She was uncomfortable with the idea of the chosen people. She was uncomfortable with the violence of Israel. So in some ways, I grew up in a non or anti-Zionist context at home. And even so, the culture, the society that I grew up in was so committed to the idea, the Zionist idea, that Judaism equals Zionism, that Judaism means a relationship to Israel, that as a child and as a young person, I had a deeply racist view of Palestinians. And this is something that I continue to grapple with and to remember what I thought, and the ignorance that brought me to, and the fear that brought me to think the way that I thought. But then in my 20s, I connected with organizers who were working on LGBTQ prison abolition projects. And I found that many of them were invested in Palestine and in Palestinian liberation. And I thought at the time that I would do a little more research, and then I would be able to explain to them why what they were doing was anti-Semitic. But of course, when I did the research, and this is, Professor Pape's story as well, and he is one of the people who brought those stories to a larger public, I learned that everything that I had known about Palestine was wrong, was propaganda. So I got involved with Jewish Voice for Peace at that time. And I want to name that one of the most important spiritual principles that helped me through that period was community. I would go to rallies against Operation Protective Edge, which was the attack on Gaza in 2014. And I didn't know if I was safe. I had been told I was unsafe if I was around people wearing keffiyehs, if I was around people holding Palestinian flags. I thought maybe I was unsafe, but I would go there and I would see other Jews, and I would see people who were willing to talk to me and willing to answer my questions. And through that, I learned to be able to start distinguishing between being uncomfortable and being unsafe. And that has held me and led me through a lot of my activism and organizing since then. Subsequently, I got a job as a professor in Florida. And in 2019, Ron DeSantis passed the first of his anti-higher education laws. Many of us are more familiar with the more recent ones, such as the Stop Woke Act. But in 2019, the law that was passed was one that said that it was illegal for professors to criticize the state of Israel. And, in that moment, I knew that this tension was going to become, at some point, unsupportable in my job. And I didn't know how quickly or how exactly that would play out. But then October 7th came, and in the horror of recognizing immediately that the response from the state of Israel, emboldened and enabled by my own government, was going to be so horrific, and then seeing very quickly how horrifying it was, Jewish Voice for Peace was really my resource, my grounding point, my space of community. And on October 8th, JVP had a gathering, and they emphasized, as people on this call have, the context, the history. The history is so important. If we don't understand the history, we don't understand what's happening here. And I wrote a letter to the editor to one of my local papers talking about that context. And the response from donors to my institution was immediate and shocking to me. People I had known for years, who I had worked with closely, suddenly said they couldn't speak to me because it would be unsafe for them to speak to me on the phone. The fact that I had named that there's a historical context for this, that it goes back 75 years of ethnic cleansing, at the time 75 years, now 76, that it includes the 17 years of siege and blockade, etc. You know, they claimed that that meant, naming that history meant that they were unsafe. And so I come back to this idea of safety and unsafety, which I think is something that we absolutely have to confront and we have to unpack in this moment, because all of us are being asked to make a choice. How are we going to show up in this moment? And when we face that choice point where there is the choice that is the right choice, the choice that is aligned with our spiritual values, and then there's the choice that seems to be the safe choice, that seems to be the less risky choice, that's where I think we have to really draw on the resources of our spiritual traditions, of our communities, to recognize that when a genocide is happening, no one is safe. There might be the false sense of safety of choosing not to speak out, of choosing to continue in your life for a little longer in the way that it seems to be possible. But is that really possible? And so, you know, people like Professor Pappé were a real source of courage for me. In the subsequent months, I was investigated and surveilled and questioned and forced to resign from my job. And now I've relocated states. And I knew that he had been doing that years before. He had had to leave his country. He had lost his friends. In so many ways, I recognized that I was doing this work in a moment where, you know, Jewish Voice for Peace is the largest anti-Zionist Jewish organization with over 700,000 members. And there's this rich Jewish culture of anti-Zionist Jews that has been growing and has been creating alternative spaces. So I had this community, I had this support that people before me had not had, and certainly people in Palestine, the people who are most directly impacted by this violence, they don't have that either. And so suddenly the choices that seemed so scary, to speak up, to take those risks, to, you know, confront what I had always been told, that it's the third rail of academia, you never criticize Israel. Suddenly those choices weren't so scary. Suddenly those choices were not impossible to make.
Yeah, it's thank you for that, Nikki. Wow, that's really super, like, deep in your packaging of your experiencing. And it reminds me a talk I went to Meitel Yavin the other day, and they were talking similar about this safety, like this romantic idea, nostalgic idea of there's always Israel as a safe place, to really consider what it means to manage to keep that sense of safety, not only what we're seeing, what it means, but also for those joining the IDF, and, you know, the moral peril, the moral injury, what they're doing, you know, that it's actually taking the life also of those in Israel. So, you know, this is a very deep, I agree. And I, you know, having been in this sort of low-grade war zone when we first lived in South Africa, there was a lot in the white community, very similar myths of, you know, a land without people, or people without land, and all of that, so parallel. And then this real point that we were also arrived at as, you know, do we get a gun like every, you know, or not, and all the rest of it. So I can really relate to this deep, you know, to overcome fear. And that's something I think you know, maybe just briefly as we begin to wrap up, and then I think we're going to have some comments, I think, from, I'm not quite sure where we're going, but you know, what is and you already talked about that, and you've already made that journey, and it feels like a journey we all need to make in a very deep way, is to move beyond the fear that oppresses, the intimidation, the sense of being intimidated, the shame, all of these forces that keep human consciousness oppressed, at a moment when we have to stand up and show courage and move from courage. So I'd like to ask you, what does that look like for you? What brings you, what you already mentioned, Ilan Pape, that has given you a lot of courage, but, you know, anything else, any other tips and hints around that territory? I think it's really central. at the moment. And also with that, of course, the courage to, like, what really helped bring down apartheid was sanctions. So, you know, I think we know on a political front, it's going to be very hard with the incoming regime in the US and the legislation that's already happening to keep fighting on that edge. But the BDS movement, the sanctioning, this is a very effective thing that global citizens can do.
Yes, and it's incredible to be able to share space and to virtually meet Jamal Juma after admiring his work for so long. BDS is absolutely one of the critical tools that we have and that we have had and that we need to continue to commit to and recommit to. It's a form of nonviolent pressure that has had the power to not only end the apartheid in South Africa, but also it has been such a crucial tool of activism in the US. So I'm thinking of the boycott movement in the civil rights movement that ended the segregation in Montgomery buses. Boycotts are an incredibly powerful and effective tool. And one of the reasons and one of the ways we know that BDS has the potential to transform this situation is the fierceness with which Zionists are attacking it. So in the United States, we are facing more and more laws that criminalize BDS. We are facing such a depth of outrage and fear because they know that if this strategy is pursued in a committed way by the population, that it can be successful. And one thing I want to really name is that in thinking about BDS, we really need to think about it as a tool of collective power, not as a question of personal morality. And this is something that I think sometimes can be missed in the Western world, that this is not a question of whether you are a good or bad person by what you buy or eat, but about how you are joining with others to make our collective voices overwhelmingly powerful by making choices about where you spend your money, where you invest your money, and how you lobby your governments for things like sanctions. Now, as you said, in the United States, JVP does not believe that legislative or federal legislative action is going to have much promise in the near future with a Trump administration and united houses of Congress. That is not to say that there was significant legislative action prior. You know, it has been absolutely devastating to see, as other speakers spoke about, the inaction from the administration that's currently in power, or perhaps I should say the action to further the genocide. But in the face of this limitation that we have, that it may not be our governments that are going to take action, and others tonight have spoken about the fact that the people are clearly united for Palestine, and yet the governments are not responding. The governments are not paying attention. What we have are other forms of power. So I recommend people learn more about BDS and learn more about specific campaigns such as breaking the bonds, divesting from Israel bonds. JVP has been pursuing that. And other campaigns to transform the way that we talk about this issue. Because ultimately, so much of the power that has shaped the possibility for this genocide to continue unchecked for 14 months is from the narrative, is from the way that the story has been told. You know, as I said, as a child, I had a completely false understanding, and this is exactly what has been done, you know, globally. So we have people like Lubna here and the incredible work she does with Middle East Eye. And my own challenge constantly is to stay with the coverage and to stay present to the information about the horrors that are happening, and then to turn that into action, because we have to both witness and act. We can't just witness and we can't turn away because it's too overwhelming, but we also must turn that into action. And so some specific actions that people can take: tell people about this session, tell people about what you learned today. That's an initial way to start those conversations and perhaps even tell people who may not want to hear about it. We need to be able to move into discomfort. We need to be able to lean into discomfort. Learn more about efforts to work on divestment campaigns in your community. And the BDS National Campaign has resources that can connect you to those local resources. And then JVP, which is open to Jews and allies, has a number of other ways that you can get involved in specific campaigns to divest from Israel bonds, and then also to transform the narrative by refusing the conflation of Zionism and Judaism, such as the campaign to drop the ADL, to stop the Anti-Defamation League from being able to define what Judaism is.
Right.
And then the final thing I will name for myself, that this year was the first time I went to Palestine. As I said, growing up, my mother always told me she didn't want me going to some place that was so dangerous and so violent, that had such a horrific impact on the people there. And I never went. And I knew at a certain point in this past year that I had to go. I had to be there for myself. I had to learn, and I had to be able to see what was happening on the ground. And so I had the opportunity to go with the International Solidarity Movement and spend July in the West Bank working with Palestinian shepherds and families who are resisting Israeli occupation. And that may not be an option for everyone, but there are a number of different ways for people to go to the West Bank and see what Lubna and Jamal described, and to experience it, and to recognize, in their core, and then to tell their communities that this is what is really happening, no matter what the media blackouts, no matter what the propaganda tries to say. This is what is really happening. This is what is wrong. This is what has to change. And thank you again for the opportunity to add my voice to this incredible conversation. Thank you. And
Thank you
shalom
so-
aleichem. Peace be upon you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki. Before you disappear, I want, someone was asking, boycott, divest, sanction, BDS. So there is an app. I don't know if you can see it. It's called No Thanks. There are many apps where you can just you can go and just see, use that when you go shopping to see if it's something to support or not, in terms of with boycotting Israeli products.
And if I may,
Sure, of course, please. Yeah.
One thing I just really encourage people to do is to take things one step at a time, because by trying to do everything all at once, we can get overwhelmed and nothing can be possible. And so when it comes to BDS, if trying to think about every single product is too overwhelming, look at the BDS National Committee's website, see the key targets, and there's usually 5 or 6 at a time, and know that by coming together, all of us collectively, and focusing our pressure on those specific companies, we can do so much more than any one of us just trying to boycott on our own. And then once you're doing that, then move on to the next step and the next step.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki. And the piece I want to end with you as well is is that we can still see you. We got to do this together. I think there's the enormity of everything we're now facing, and it's a global movement now. It's initiated really by the depth of destruction of Gaza, and connecting all these dots together, that we shouldn't be attempting to do this on our own, and that these movements like Jewish Voice for Peace, if not now, and many other movements are already that we can engage with and be involved with. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at the end too. Thank you so much, Nikki. Super helpful.
Thank you.
Such an honor to have you with us. Hey, Lubna. So how are we doing, dear heart? Okay, I think we're going to be putting a few things in the chat for folks as resources. Any thoughts that you have at this stage, Lubna, from everything we've been focusing on? Anything that comes, highlights for you?
I mean, we are into times, very hard time, with kind of a collapse of the world. Not only Palestine and Gaza, but we are witnessing such a huge scale of crimes and humanity. I think what's happening in Gaza reflects the hearts of the soldiers and of Israel, and it's another level of this destruction. And sometimes seeing all of this happening is making us feel so small in making a difference or changing anything. And I want to address that from my experience. When I've been when people say to me, what difference what you are doing is making in this world? You gave your life or struggle at the voice of my mom, you didn't make a family and children and all of this. And what is the result? And I would say two things. What other option do we have if not to take action? What is the alternative? Is it to stand in the side and be in denial and under a veil? Is it the option that we want to take in this life? And the second thing that I learned together with you and my beloved Karim and our friend Ahmed from Gaza, which is like through a lot of thoughts and conversations with Ahmed, who lost his oldest son and half of his family and house was gone. And he teaches a lot about yaqeen, about faith, about a trust. This faith is so strong that give people this faith, this belief that they will be liberated. This deep faith, this trust, I like the word trust more than hope. It's concrete, that what we are doing will make a difference. We have to keep pushing the wheel. We have to take action. We have to do what we can do. We have to explore more about courage. Courage is the natural side of our souls and our spirit and our personalities, not fear. We have to be ready to give up some of our privileges, some of our jobs or losing work, but to learn to stand up and to break the silence of what's happening, because what's happening is big and it's scary and should be scary for all of us. Genocide became a policy that been taken against societies, working class societies. If it passed in Gaza, it is passed in Rohingya, Cambodia, it will reach any other community. It will be used in the future. And we have to take action and to push the energy and our work towards something else. With so much faith and so much yaqeen and so much trust that it will make a difference. Look at these prisoners in Syria going out of the prisons after 40 years, 13 years. What did they have to give away from their freedoms for the principles and for the liberation of their souls and for their country? And I want you to be in gratitude and of what you are doing and to acknowledge it and to recognize it. And I want to thank you all for being here and for being patient and for listening. And I send you all the love and the courage and the wisdom and the resistance and the resilience of the Palestinians back to you wherever you are in this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lubna. That feels like a huge blessing. Thank you. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I have a candle on the shrine here, just in front of the Buddha, for Lubna, for Palestinian, and for everyone that is being so deeply, I have very dear friends in that region, beloveds, and those many we don't know, to hold a candle in our heart, to hold the candle of the Dharma. And I also reflect that, you know, even the Buddha didn't always succeed in stopping wars. He did actually get in between warring parties to negotiate them down. And there was an event in his life when his own people were threatened by an army that came to wipe out his people, the Sakyans. And I don't know if I got that right, actually. Someone critiqued me on, I'm not very good at remembering off the top of my head all of the clan names. But he actually tried 3 times and got in front of the warring army and tried to stop them. And he didn't actually succeed. So even if it's not about whether we succeed or not, we want to succeed, and definitely if we don't all do something, we won't get anywhere really. But it's the point that we try, the point that we keep doing this because the heart calls us. It's the deep duty. That's a beautiful sort of word, really. The deep faith to what is humane, to all. I feel that the enormous sacrifice actually undertaken or imposed on, it's not voluntary undertaken, but imposed on Palestinian people, this deep sense of sacrifice that has needs to be honored, needs to be, and all so many people lost in genocides and wars, and lost their lands, indigenous peoples of all races, and all of us. So, you know, just to remember that what can we do? What can each of us do? And every little bit that we do really helps to add to the ocean. Each drop adds to the ocean to uplift us all, to nourish us all, and to bring the deep changes that can only really come from the shifts also within our own consciousness, within our own hearts. Which is why I'm so grateful we can do an event like this and tie it all back to the inner practice of quelling those fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, and liberating those energies within us and within the collective that are so destructive, healing the deep traumas generationally and in all of our hearts and bodies and minds and spirit. So a few things here on a practical level. Please look at the chat. This is thank you, Karim, for this solidarity, international solidarity movement, holding, witnessing, and being presences, protective presences for olive farmers. There's some from Sacred Mount Sangha Sacred Justice Coalition. There's a whole raft of resources we'll add to and send to you as well via mail post this event. A beautiful new publication that's come out with Sacred, in alliance with Sacred Justice Coalition, and the Arrow is the Arrow Journal. Sorry, I'm reading this very, but I really recommend that you sign up for this. It's incredibly well done. Lubna and Karim having a powerful conversation within it. Karim's arts within that, and many voices to learn from, to listen into. Hamed that was mentioned by Luna, and Swana scholars, teachers, and artists that are featured. Please subscribe. It's beautifully done. Yes, I think we can send that out in the resources about the top 5 JVP, top BDS, or Nikki, if you want to put that in the chat, if you have a moment while we do the closing prayer. Thank you for that question. Sorry that we haven't had time to really respond to the inputs. We'll all, as was said in the beginning, we'll read them. We'll, you know, this is a collective. We're just hosting our own collective process here, listening in together, but we really want to have an opportunity to listen into voices that have been suppressed for so long, the voices of the Palestinian people, activists, deep practitioners, motivated by this great service to spirit, to humane values, to ethics, to freedom. Working, many of them, with Israeli allies, Jewish allies, together from within those lands. Jewish Voice for Peace, thank you again so much, Nikki. Thank you so much to our incredible team. They've been sweating away in the background. Just putting this together. Thank you so much, Michele. Let's just close with a sharing of blessing before we go. Can you just take a few moments to just breathe and feel in our own hearts the gift that we've received from listening today. May we share the blessings of this gathering, of all the profound qualities and spirit that was shared, that resides within all of the prayers that are held for collective liberation. May we send those out into the world, traveling on a frequency of love and compassion, healing, transformation, that all beings may be touched by peace. May all renounce the path of greed, hatred, and delusion. And may all of us, touched by compassion, healing, and know true liberation together, the joy, the happiness, the freedom of that. May it be so. Thank you so much, dear friends. There's also an opportunity to offer Dharma, so a word for free will offerings from the blessings we hold. We've been sending many donations. Our last event, $11,000 we sent to the Palestinian Medical Association, overseeing 45 medical teams in Gaza. And then the event before, we sent to many different outlets. This again, we're sponsoring people, and we'll be sending so that you can directly donate to people, particularly on the front lines of being impacted by Gaza and so forth, West Bank, by this horror that's happening. May there be peace, may there be a ceasefire. May beings come to their senses of perpetuating this terror. May all wake up, may all of us together. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any last words from any of our team members?